Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of My EdTech Live. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful, and hopefully in your area, it is also a beautiful, beautiful Saturday morning. Many of you may just be getting up, putting on your cup of coffee, maybe having that first sip, that first bite of some breakfast, depending where in the world you're visiting us from today, because I know that today we will have a lot of guests showing up here in the chat that are joining us from the UK, and for them it's already mid-afternoon. But wherever it is that you're from, thank you so much for choosing some time out of your day to join us here with the wonderful and always amazing Kat Lamon, that we will be here talking, just having a great conversation and just hearing some great things that have happened within this year. And we know that it has been a difficult year, but Staffroom, and you'll learn a little bit more about Staffroom, has been just an amazing, amazing thing. So thank you guys for joining us right now. I see AJ Bianco. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. AJ's been a guest on our show and also an administrator. So let's go ahead and get started. So Kat, please go ahead and tell our audience members, our viewers, our watchers, our listeners who you are, what you do, and especially where you're from.
So hi everyone, my name's Kat. I'm currently living in London, UK, but I'm originally from Cornwall, which is deepest, darkest southwest England. I am what's called an EdTech consultant, which is similar to a coach in the US. After 11 years as a primary school teacher, so teaching the younger students under 11. And that's a little bit about me. I run a mental health Starframe for Global GEG, and that was something we started nearly a year ago today.
Yeah, and that's something that we were just talking about a little bit before the show started. March 14th, actually for ourselves, I still remember, and it's coming up to that date, March 13th, when we were kind of prepping and seeing, okay, how long is this going to go through here in Texas? And then all of a sudden it's March 16th and we just had to just transition and all that good stuff that we've seen. And I know it's been hard, but Staffroom and Global GEG, some amazing, amazing things that have come out during this time. And that's something that I really thought would be a wonderful show, Kat, and the work that you have been able to do, and you being able to have that foresight and see there's going to be a need here, especially for educators during this time because of this switch. So tell us a little bit where maybe this idea came from. How did you just start it,
I'm going to sort of rewind massively because I forgot to give you a little bit of information about me anyway. So as a young person, I made up my mind I wanted to be a teacher when I was about 9. And I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. And that was my goal in life. So I worked hard. I was a teacher before I turned 21. I qualified just before I turned 21, which means I didn't stop. I didn't take any gap years. I didn't break. And it was what I wanted to do. When I first qualified to teach, I was in Cornwall, which is southwest England. It's a desirable place to live. So there were about 100 applicants for every single teaching post that came up. And I know from people who were heads down there, they would just throw half away at random because what's the point? There's got to be a good one in the 50 you've got left. So as a newly qualified teacher who was a bit anxious, to be fair, I didn't get any jobs. So eventually I moved to London. After 2.5 years of supply teaching, trying to find a job, ended up in London. I was working in a school, and it was a really interesting school. It was a secondary school, so middle school for you guys. And they just made a decision that the weakest 60 children weren't allowed to be taught by proper secondary school teachers, and they had to be taught by primary school teachers because they weren't very academic or whatever. So my first full-time teaching role actually was teaching these poor kids that had been labelled as stupid by the system, basically. And they knew it, and everybody knew it, that these 60 children in 3 classes were the weakest academically. And they'd been shoved in the top corner of the school, thrown away almost. And it was heartbreaking because these children had, in all fairness, degenerated to savages when I joined. They'd got rid of their teacher. They'd literally been so awful to her that she left after 6 weeks, and so they had no teacher for 5 weeks, and they made their job. They actually told me on my first day that their favorite thing to do was to get rid of teachers and see how long they could last. And this was my first teacher role, and I come from a very white area, and I moved to London, and it was a very mixed area. You know, my class was a third Somalian, a third white, and then a third of various other ethnicities. And I, it was certainly an interesting experience, and they took advantage of my naivety at times. But within 6 weeks of me being their teacher, teachers were coming to this top dark corner of this massive school to tell me that the class had changed and what had I been doing with them. And it was sort of that moment where I realized, oh no, I can do this teaching thing. I can help. And that was a really nice difference. And seeing that if you get to the bottom of what people want from life, you can help them and do well. Like there's one little boy, and I always remember his name was Mukhtar, and he was really naughty, and he was, you know, teachers hated him. And then I discovered one day that he wanted to be a doctor. And it meant that if I just said to him, you know, Mukhtar, if you want to be a doctor, you can't do that. And he stopped. And then this, really unfortunately, I went to see the teachers who were going to be looking after him the next year. And the teacher said to me, oh, I don't want to hear about that. I don't care. And I think that was the point where I realized I couldn't stay at that school, because I knew that the second they were out of my care, that was it. They were written off again. And so I sort of applied randomly for jobs, and I didn't even realize that I'd applied for a private school until I got the job. And they were like, so what drew you to a private school? And I was like, oh, that's what this is. I thought they were very well-behaved children. So desperate because I'd applied late in the year. And I actually ended up spending 8 years in that school, because it was a really good school to be in, really positive environment. But so one of the things, I don't know what it's like in the US, but in the UK, you are expected to disclose if you have mental health problems, but people don't. You know, nobody wants that black mark against their name. It's not a legal requirement, I don't think. But I always put it on, you know, I don't care. I suffered from depression when I was 19. And it was in my first year at university. And it was a horrible experience. I was suicidal. I was very briefly taken to a mental health hospital. Although I think now looking back, it was to scare me, not to actually put me in there properly. And, you know, 19 years old, just back from my first year at university, my world fell apart, and I ended up on medication. And so, you know, I don't know what point in my life after that, but I was just like, well, you know, that's who I am. It was a thing that happened to me. I've moved on from it, la, la, la. And so, you know, when I applied for this job, I put on the form, yes, I suffer from depression. And I think I remember the deputy head at the time just said to me, you know, I've noticed you've put that. You know, if you do have any problems, let me know. And, you know, with the 8 years I was there were a few times I had wobbles. And the particular one for me was 2011. My dad got diagnosed with a brain tumor. And that was not fun. And they were really supportive of me, really good, really wonderful, looked after me. But the one thing they kept saying was, you know, we appreciate this. We know it's a problem for you. We're happy to support you, but we don't want the parents to know. And at the time I thought, okay, that makes sense. The parents are paying £18,000 a year to send, or 15,000 or whatever it was, to send their children here. They don't want to know that a staff member's unstable. But looking back with hindsight, I kind of think, well, actually, you knew I was a good teacher. You knew I was a good supporter of staff. Couldn't you have, if the parents found out, couldn't you have said, well, that doesn't affect her ability to teach? So there's that kind of that two-sided, and I understand where they were coming from, but always at the back of my mind, I think, was this, but actually, I think it makes me a better teacher in some ways, because I recognize mental health problems because I've had them. So that's sort of where I'm coming from in a lot of ways. And then my dad did actually pass away in 2014. And that was obviously quite a difficult time. And again, the school were really great. They gave me some time off, but it was also at that time that in the UK, the national curriculum changed. So we went from not really teaching computing, just doing digital literacy. And we were the first country in the world to introduce computer science and coding into our curriculum. And I knew nothing about it. And I was the computing coordinator at the time. And I remember it was earlier in the year before my dad passed away. And a parent came in, a really lovely guy called Simon Holden, came in and said, you know, can I have a meeting with you and the head? Okay, we all met. We had this meeting. So, you know, the curriculum's changing in September, and we all went, what? Okay. And he was really lovely, and he talked about this thing called Code Club and how he could help if we were willing to do a club at 8 a.m. every morning. And the way my school worked was that we had a meeting at 8 a.m. We had to start work. We had that 20 minutes after the meeting to get ready if we still needed to. So there's no way I could run a club with him at 8 a.m. So I was like, I'll run my own club. It'll be fine. Didn't have a clue. Never looked at Scratch even at that point. So I sort of started running this club, and the way Code Club used to work was you put out for volunteers, and I thought someone will volunteer to come in and help. No. So I just learned it myself, and then eventually I bullied my friend to come and join me, and that was when I found this thing called a Raspberry Pi. Thought, well, I'll get a few of them. Managed to persuade the school to buy me 4 of them. Didn't have a clue what I was doing with that. Found a thing, searching Twitter, and as you and I both big fans of Twitter, finding our personal learning friends and whatever else. And I can't even remember how, but I found something called Pi Academy on Twitter, which was a Raspberry Pi training, and got onto the 3rd ever cohort of that. And it was that for me was this big transformational moment, because I went on some training, and up until then, and I really hope nobody from my school watches this, because every training I ever had, I fell asleep. Not for long, but I could just feel myself drifting off by mid-afternoon, And then I went up to Cambridge. I went to the Raspberry Pi Foundation's office, and I did this 2-day training where not only was I awake, but I was buzzing. I mean, literally, there was one point where a girl I became very good friends with, Hannah Mills, and I were working on something, and we literally jumped up and ran screaming down the corridor, because we'd got a code, we'd written a bit of Python to make a button take a photo and publish it to Twitter, I think. And I just suddenly had this moment of, oh my God, training can be fun. And it was this big epiphany moment for me. And that's what led me out of the classroom effectively, because I just kept seeing this boring training and thinking, no, that's not how it should be. And in the meantime, my school bought iPads the school asked the children to buy iPads. Oh, wow. And told me to deploy it. Off you go, Kat, you can do that. You can be in charge of all that. Learnt Meraki in a day. And I found this thing called Google Apps for Education. I was like, yeah, that looks good. That looks like an easy way for me to get the children doing emailing and stuff. And that was 2014 or 15. It was when Google Classroom before Google Classroom existed. And I was using that in the background, and just constantly using Google, and it changed names to G Suite for Education. So I made this decision around about 2015-16 that actually what I wanted to be doing was helping teachers, making training fun, delivering computer science, all of this kind of stuff. So that's what led me out of the classroom. I ended up I actually ended up leaving the classroom and working for an EdTech startup for a while, doing some Raspberry Pi stuff for a company called PyTop. And then when I left them, I was really fortunate that Andy Caffrey contacted me and said, oh, I do Google training. Would you be interested? I know you've noticed you've mentioned Google quite a bit in your Twitter. And so obviously became a Google trainer on his recommendation, and then looked at Innovator. And I had applied for Google Innovator in 2014. I think it was the same year my dad died. I applied. I think it was the week my dad died, as a distraction. And I didn't get in. And I'm kind of glad I didn't get in, because I don't think that would have been right for me. And then I was going to apply for Denmark 2018. And I think it was too short a time scale. I found out about it about 3 days before the application was due. So then I was going to apply for London, and that was my due date for William, my son. So I was going to apply for London. So right, that's it. I'm going to apply for Sweden 2019. And I kept putting it off, and I kept putting it off. And then I think Andy messaged me maybe a couple of days before the application was due and said, have you done it yet? No. So I did the quickest application I've ever done. I did work hard on it. I mean, it was literally a case of, Stuart, take William into the bedroom. I don't mind if he's crying. I don't care. I need to do this. Just leave me in peace. And so I did my application. I saw everyone posting on Twitter about how they'd applied, and I was like, no, I'm not confident enough. Definitely not. And that's, unlike me. So I applied, and I did get into Sweden, and that was a really good experience for me, even though the whole week I was horribly ill and couldn't concentrate. And the key thing that came out of that was meeting Jessalyn Swanson, who is a wonderful innovator. And she and I became quite good friends. Really, you know, we'd chat quite a bit. And then suddenly one day, I think it was late November-ish, I got added to this random Twitter group that eventually became known as AWE20. And it was about 20 odd people, all of them innovators and all of them complete loonies, including Abid, Luis, the Stephs, Leslie, all of those wonderful people. And Jess had basically said, you know, I want to add Kat to the group, and Abid, okay, fine. So the next thing I knew, I was getting a million Twitter messages, and we sort of fast forward to 2020, and you know, we've been chatting for a few months, and there'd been regular meetups, and I almost never made them because I was kind of like, baby, don't know what I'm doing. And the world started to fall apart. And I saw people on Twitter, you know, look at this, here's my resource, here's this, here's that. And I was thinking, I'm not in the classroom. I don't really know what I can do. I just don't have a place to help people. And as schools, or as things started to close down, I had this sort of epiphany moment where I thought to myself, actually, there is something I can do. That, you know, everything's crashing around people. We're all throwing resources out there into the deep blue ether, but actually, I can guarantee that while there are plenty of people chatting, talking, throwing things out there, there are also a lot of people who are sitting in a dark corner, panicking, and don't have anyone to talk to about it. And I thought back to my own periods of mental health, and you know, over the years, I've had times where spontaneously I felt like everybody hates me, the world's against me. I mean, that's part and parcel of being a depressive. My brain just flicks a switch and starts to tell me that people are only being nice because they feel sorry for me and things like that. And I thought, my gosh, you know, I know how to deal with that because I've dealt with it since I was 19. Right now, there are people who just feel like everything's going wrong around them and they don't have anyone to talk to. So I ran this past the sort of AWE20 group and said, you know, what do you think about doing, you know, a Starframe or something? And just opening it up and seeing who wants to come and talk. And I think we sat and I opened a document and brainstormed what we could talk about, and like people like Jess Marsh from Canopy, and Abid and Emma Pass, Nicholas Provenzano. I was even getting, you know, anyone I knew who was willing to join in and talk about it. And I knew there were people who were confident in talking about mental health. And I knew there were people who had mentioned to me in passing that they were struggling. And I knew there were people who hadn't said anything, but probably were. And I just grabbed as many people as possible and said, who's in? And we had this sort of list of GEGs that were becoming part of it. And it got to a point where I think it was about eight or nine different GEGs. And I can't remember if it was me or someone else, but we just said, let's just call it Global GEG. You know, that's just Global GEG Starframe. Let's go with that because there's just too many names on the list. And so I made this Google form. And we just, I think I said at the time, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know what this is going to look like, but let's give it a go and open up this place where people can talk. And I sent out a Google form, made a calendar invite. The first one was on a Saturday, which we never actually repeated because I was just, you know, what day can we do it? And I think the schools in the US closed on the 13th, wasn't it?
Yes.
So we said, okay, it looks like US schools are going to close this week. Let's get this on Saturday the 14th, so it's there if people need it. It's a space to talk. And I think those first few weeks, we literally just did an hour of everyone just, where are you from? What do you do? And how are you feeling right now? And you could almost feel this weight lifting off people's shoulders as they talked. And a few people said, oh, you know, it's getting quite long, all these introductions. Maybe we should rein them in a little bit. And I kind of like, I agree. But at the same time, this is how you can feel it helping people, having that opportunity to talk. And I think, I can't even remember when I did it, but that was when we started introducing the on a scale of 1 to 9. And the infamous rubber ducky came into play. So we started just, you know, on a scale, give us your number and why. And I did that by random, you know, it was a thing I thought would be fun. And I can't believe how empowering that was for people, because it was the why. When you said, what number are you and why, and even if you said, what song are you feeling right now and why, what color are you feeling and why, and you could really gauge people's stress level, their mood, what was going on in their lives. And you'd have someone who's chatting away, friendly, la 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 la, and then they say, yeah, I'm a 3 because I feel like everything's crashing around me. And you're like, you don't get that from people just chatting. And I think I sort of realized we developed this safe space. And because I've always been fairly open about my mental health, yes, I suffer from depression. Yes, I'm struggling a bit. Other people started to speak too. And afterwards they say, oh, I don't normally talk about that kind of thing, but you made me feel okay. And I don't know, there was just something so powerful about the fact that people felt comfortable talking about their mental health, and having that confidence to just pour it out. And what I found really interesting was that over the time we've been running, we've been running it for a year, and there are people like yourself and Rick who've been there from day one and, always there. And at the beginning we were doing 3 a week. So I was doing, I think it was a 10 a.m. on Tuesday, or no, 2 p.m. on Tuesday, 10 a.m. on Thursday, and the one we stuck to 8 p.m. on Sundays. And then Leslie Altman, bless her, offered to take on the Thursday ones, because I just couldn't. I was literally, every time William napped, I was running another Starframe. And we were getting 25 people at each session, some duplicates, but quite often different people depending on the time zones. And it was just incredible. And by sort of July, as American schools went back and UK schools wound down for the year, we dropped down to about 5 or 6 people in each one. And that was the point we said, okay, let's just do 1 a week. And I ran it past the AWE group and said, what do you think? Should we go to 1 a week? And Leslie was like, yeah, I'm getting the same. I'm only getting a handful of people. But we're still going. We're still getting those regulars. We're still getting people. And one of the things I like is that we get people who come every week. So we chat. We know each other now. And I was saying to you before, it's one of my favorite things that have come out of Starframe. I have people I consider, like yourself, really good friends on the other side of the world.
Yes.
That I would never have met if it wasn't for this Starframe that we're doing. And I have people I can ask, that understand me, that understand my language when I talk computing. Like the other day, I think Judy and I fell into a really deep and dark conversation about Scratch for 20 minutes, and nobody batted an eye. Everyone's like, okay, that's normal for us. And I love that side of the Starframe, that we can just chat away. And I've completely forgotten what I was talking about because I got distracted.
No, but this is perfect, and this is amazing. Like, just getting that whole backstory, so people know who Cat Lemon is. People know how this Global GEG Staffroom started, and the importance and the impact that it has made, not only just there in the UK, but I mean, you're talking about a global impact. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it may be like 25, 30 of us that show up, continually, but we're from all parts of the world. And the way you mentioned, kind of going back to when you were talking about your teaching experience, and you're talking about the one student that wanted to be a doctor, but you mentioned something that really resonated with me, is when you look at the roots, what is causing this, but then you also get to know the student and what their interests are. It all starts with building relationships, and the fact that you took the time to ask, to wonder, to be curious, and build that relationship, build that connection. You knew how to address, your student, because of your personal experience that you went through as well, and being able to recognize. Now, many people may not pick up those hints. Many people may not pick up those nuances that say, hey, is there something going on here, and so on. So it's very important. And the relationship, going back to that, I think being part of Staffroom from the beginning, to find a space where other educators, that we were talking about this a little earlier, we may be presenting ourselves and doing amazing presentations or doing work, and maybe you're in a position where people look at you like, oh my goodness, like, how do they have it together? But when you can go into a staff room and just kind of just that weight lifts off your shoulders because you're pretty much either just working on adrenaline, you're just going and going because of the situation. But when you get to come to staff room and you get to talk to people that understand where you're coming from, like you're saying, the conversations like you and Judy, we all have conversations where people just get us. You understand where we're coming from, and we can just the rubber ducky. How are you feeling from 1 to 9? Well, I'm feeling maybe like a 5, a little deflated. Why? And to me, that's the magic, the why. And it has allowed me to see things from a different perspective, understand more what the importance of mental health is. Because I'll be honest with you, Kat, up until school started closing, I've never even heard of the term mental health, but now I see the importance of it, not only for our educators, for our students, but for everybody, especially living in this time where you may feel you're just enclosed, you don't have that contact with people anymore. I mean, you're calling it social distancing, and even then I try and not even use the word social distancing because I want to tell people you can still socialize, but
Yeah.
in a space. So it's more of kind of like a not social, but more of kind of like it's just a positional distancing, but we can still talk, we can still relate, and so on, because it's hard. And but being able to come to a room and meet wonderful educators from around the globe and hear that, hey, you know what? You're not the only one struggling. There's a lot of us that are going through this, and you're able to open up and build each other up, give advice, just share, or most importantly, just listen. And oftentimes, like you said, that's so important when you take the time to genuinely care about what somebody has to say and you learn from them, you get a greater appreciation of that person, their life, where they're coming from. And to me, Staff Room going on a year now has been one of the biggest blessings to me, both personally, more than anything, my personal growth in understanding and being able to listen and see things through different lenses and learn new things that I had never learned before, but professionally as well as being able to now see, learn, get a feel, and allow me to adapt, improvise, and change things depending on moods, depending on how people are doing. And it's something that's very important. And I mean, I really want to thank you and everybody in the AWE group that came up with this staff room. And this is where I lived, 3 days a week for the most part, for that 1 hour to just go to a place where I can just kind of be myself for a little bit and let people know, like, hey, like I'm burning out here, or like, hey, I I don't know where to go from here. What do I do? What's next? Does anybody have any suggestions? Or just be there and listen and encourage other people.
Yeah.
And relationships, I think it all comes down to that, just building that relationship, that space. And one thing that you mentioned that I am very thankful for is being able to get to know people from across the globe that I would have never had the opportunity to meet, and genuinely know who they are, genuinely care about them, check in on them. I mean, we're continually sending messages to like, how's everybody doing? Hey, can anybody help with this? Or sometimes, we were talking about this earlier. There'll be some of us that build that bond and that relationship where we're like, hey man, like, is anybody up for a chat? Like, I just need 10 minutes, 30 minutes off of staff room time, but is anybody available? And
Yeah.
just to say, hey, yeah, like, hey, let's chat it up, see what's going on. And man, that has been so beneficial in so many ways for a lot of us, and it's just been amazing. So like you said, March 14th is going to
Yeah.
be already the 1 year of staff room, and it has
Very.
been an amazing ride.
I'm already starting to plan something. I don't know what yet, but we've got to do a party. And it's so fascinating. There are a few things that I find really interesting about the Starframe as a whole. There are people on there, and I see this, and it's the same with me. We have our staff room persona, which is more ourselves, and it really is like walking into a staff room. And so you relax and you come down, and you talk about ice cream, and there's a bit of bad language, I'm not going to lie, and everyone just pours it out. And then you watch that same person do a presentation about Gmail or about Wakelet or whatever, and it's a different person, because that's the professional persona. And I love the fact that people feel like when they walk into staff room, when they open the staff room meet, they can relax and they can be themselves and share and let things out. And then the other thing I really like is it's the people who pop in. And so there are people who come all the time and they talk and they just pour it all out. And there are people who just pop in and they'll say hello, because we have to do a check, because we have had the odd bot join in, and we just confirm they're a real human in the chat or whatever. And then they'll just sit with their cameras off. And the amount of times someone's just said to me, oh yeah, I just wanted to listen. I just wanted to hear you talk, because you all seem to like each other and have so much fun, and it cheers me up. And I love that side of things. And then I also like that we get people who come in and say, look, I've just got this thing that's bothering me. What do you all think about this? And we all jump in, oh yeah, this is what's happened to me. And I really love that fact that we can go from talking about the fact that in Australia fish and chips is shark, to here's how to control a classroom when you're running it on Google Meet. And it's just like that, 1 minute we're talking absolute rubbish and the next minute we are in the game. And that's it. And it's absolutely brilliant. And one of the things you mentioned there is that whole shared experience. For most of us, certainly at the start of lockdown, we felt like we were alone, because we'd gone from teaching in a large school or whatever else to sitting at home, and all our contact with children was straight via a camera. And just having that shared experience, and obviously it was scary, but at the same time it was absolutely fascinating hearing what things were like in different countries. This is what's happening in Colombia, this is what's happening in Texas, this is what's happening in Mexico, this is what's happening in Australia. And just hearing those different stories and knowing that we're all experiencing very similar things was so reassuring in some ways, in spite of the horribleness of it. And so that was really good. And as you said, it's all about when we're teaching, we as teachers, I think from my point of view, the teachers that are the best are those that are willing to get to know their students. And that is make or break, and I think having Starframe has helped us recognize that can be done remotely, because usually we make those relationships in break times, at the end of the lesson, at the start of the lesson, with the jokes we have with our students. And that doesn't work as well on a camera. And we're conscious that the parents are there watching sometimes, and lots of different barriers click in that prevent us building those same relationships. But what you do still see are those teachers who are building good relationships with their students, who are deploying those skills to make sure that it's not just the educational health of their students, but the mental health of their students that's looked after. And it's one thing I've always said from the very start. You should be doing at least one live lesson a week, but not a lesson, really. It's a social check-in. You should be doing a lesson with your students where you're literally just trying to find out how they are, using, secret methods. You're not going to be straight outright saying, so how are you? Who's ill? Who's sad? But by, deploying these things like the rubber ducky to check in and find out what's going on, because realistically, we do know that there are students at home who have abusive or horrible other situations at home, or are caring for somebody at home. And we can't, outright ask them how it's going, but we can at least get a feel from doing these little activities. And I think it's really important that we are conscious of mental health of our students and of our staff mates and the people we work with. And if Starframe's achieved one thing, I do feel like the people who come are more comfortable talking about their mental health. And I'm really, really pleased with that, because it's so important. For me, I sort of made a pact to myself 3 or 4 years ago, 2 or 3, that I would talk about my mental health. So if I'm struggling, it goes against everything that I'm battling, I will write a tweet, and I hate it, and I will hate myself for doing it. But I know that it's helping other people, if that makes sense. And I'm being open, I'm being honest about it. And it's actually got easier, weirdly. So the first time I did it, I think I wrote it, I deleted it, I wrote it, I deleted it, I wrote it, I deleted it. And now it's second nature. Okay, I know I'm struggling. I need to put something on social media that's not, oh, please give me attention, show me that you love me, but that just says, I am struggling, I'm fine, but this is what it looks like if you're struggling. And a lot of people will know that in November, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety again. Which is no surprise, really. I've been getting migraines for about a month or two. I think I'd actually had to cancel a couple of Starfrooms because of them. And the doctor kept saying to me, is everything okay? I said, yeah, it's fine. And then he said, is everything okay? And I said, well, yeah, apart from the obvious. And he said, oh, what's that? And I just sobbed. It came out of nowhere, and I hadn't noticed it.
I remember you sharing that story, and that's one thing that also, like you said, is so powerful. Just somebody that is willing to share, because you're not the only one, and other people are scared to share because, like we've talked about it several times in Staffroom. It's just that stigma, but you don't know people's struggles. I mean, like you said, one thing that you mentioned. I mean, we see all these wonderful people in Staffroom that are doing global GEG presentations, and you're looking at them like, oh my goodness, look at these people, like so just professional, so knowledgeable, so everything. And then we see them in Staffroom, and it's like, man, guys, like this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And you're thinking to yourself, we're only human, and we can only take so much, and there's only so much that we can control that is within ourselves, but sometimes we just need to talk it out. And so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt that, but
No.
if you continue with that, because I know if you want to continue sharing that, because to me it was such a powerful moment in you sharing that I was just like, wow, because it's things that I've never experienced,
Yeah.
and it's helped me understand that more.
And I think, because for me, when I think back, it's always been part of my life. I've always had that nagging sense of self-doubt, that nagging feeling that, people don't really like me. And I know that's affected my attitude, my behavior. I'm very me, look at me, please like me, please. And, I actually ended up in November, I had therapy, and I was very fortunate because one of the things with therapy is sometimes you don't click with your therapist, and then it's a waste of time. And I was very fortunate that I was given on the NHS, which is very rare. And I don't know how I got this, but I got a very good therapist who I clicked really well with. And she really helped me work through a lot of issues in my past and things like that. But it's, when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling depressed, I find a plummeting sense of self-worth. I am utterly convinced that I'm a waste of time and space. It's like imposter syndrome dialed up to 20. And I was telling myself, I'm getting messages from people thinking, oh no, they don't like me. They're secretly talking about me behind my back, and they mustn't really like me because I'm so obnoxious, I'm so annoying, I'm so in your face. And all of my all the things I perceive to be bad, I'm sort of pushing them out and thinking and using them to create a shield to myself. And so, when the doctor said, what do you mean by the obvious? And I just collapsed and sobbed. And I think I spent the rest of that day crying because I realized that I'd been thinking I was fine when I wasn't. And I'd been sort of telling myself, yes, it's fine that you're crying loads. It's fine that you're finding non-sad things sad. It's absolutely fine that you spent a day convinced that your entire mother-baby group hated you for no reason. And then it was like I felt this sense of release that actually, oh my gosh, my mental health is at a low. I'm struggling. My serotonin levels aren't working. And so when I was younger, I would, and it is one of the ways of looking at it is depression is a lack of serotonin. And I'd just be like, well, it's a physical thing. My brain can't do it. But now I know more about what was going on. There is a bit of both. My brain can't produce enough serotonin, but there are reasons behind why it's not producing enough serotonin and why I'm not bouncing back up. And it's been really good for me actually having this round of therapy, which I only finished in January. And I don't, I'm quite happy with the fact I'm on antidepressants right now. And again, really lucky. The one I'm on regularly has side effects, and I haven't had any. I know a couple of my friends, a couple of people in global GEG even are on the same one, which they've mentioned privately to me or even publicly. And I think just being able to say, yes, I've had therapy. Yes, I acknowledge that my mental health has struggled in this horrible period. It's absolutely fine. And it's really interesting for me because the newspapers talk about mental health and they say, oh, people are struggling with their mental health because of lockdown. And that to me is fascinating because I think the thing that's affected my mental health isn't the lockdown itself, it's the people not following it and not doing what they should be doing. That's what's affecting me. So I always find it really fascinating when the headline is, "Oh well, it's because people are locked at home and can't do anything. That's why they're struggling." But
Yeah.
anyway,
No, and I agree with you, on that. And like you mentioned earlier too, it's just I applaud you, and I, like I said, for just the way that you are and you're open about this, because and that's the whole point of, not only this show today, but of the global GEG staff room, is just to be able to just really share and get to know people. And like you mentioned earlier, you too, like, there may be other members that show up, to the staff room, or part of global GEG, or even just acquaintances, friends, and so on, that may be going through the same thing, and now you have helped them. You've empowered them, where maybe in that sense of, they just feel like, oh my goodness, am I the only one? And now it's like, okay, I'm not the only one, but now we can also help each other. Like, how are you doing? And check in on each other. And I think that is so important in any situation. And I think that it honestly, it may not be done enough in schools, like teacher to student, or even teacher to teacher, administrators to teachers. You try your best to, you know, put on, or say like, hey, we're going to have this meeting, but maybe not a lot of people show up, because again, that stigma, they're like, well, if I show up to that meeting now, they're going to peg me, or they're going to be like, oh, now I've got this, and then I'm going to be seen differently. And that's something that's so important, that I think that staff room has built up, that psychological safety, that you can go in there, whether you may be going through a difficult situation or not. But like you said, there are people there that just listen, and they get joy in listening to hear either somebody's success story,
yep,
or then they learn something and say, you know what, wow, like this is deep. There are people that are going through some difficult times, and then they'll start slowly actively participating, and then opening up, and it just becomes like this amazing support, a global support group, pretty much is what is what it is. And you're learning from one another across the globe, that you're not the only one in Texas, you're not the only one in California, you're not the only one in the UK or in Australia, wherever it is that you're from, that may be going through these struggles. And I think that that has been or that has made an amazing difference for myself, to be able to just go in there and just unwind, and just like, I'm with people that understand that I can
yeah,
talk and say, "Hey, this is what's going on," and they're like, "Okay, cool. Like, I'm going through that, or I just went through that. Let me share what I did," or and we go bounce back from tech to personal, from personal to tech, and it's just that amazing, just again, that safety, that psychological safety. So it's just been something that has been wonderful and so helpful. And going back to what you're saying, teachers, and educators don't know the struggles that students may be going on, that may be having at home. And I'm going to quote, and I've used this quote several times in a lot of the trainings that I've done, and it comes from another innovator, Devin Rossiter. And this resonated with me when he said, as teachers, we need to understand that we are guests in our students' homes. We're now in their private space. We're now in that area where they may have those struggles. They're going through difficult situations, and you're going to see that now firsthand. And like we mentioned earlier, either the parent is going to be there right side by side. You're going to see something that may not be, that you never thought that you would see, because we know our students from our four walls in our schools, and we know that not everybody has been dealt the best hand, that maybe for those 8 hours that they're in school, those are the safest 8 hours that they have before they go home. And now a lot of teachers have seen the home situation, the home life. And I know that that adds stress to them too, as well, aside from, hey, everybody, we need to make sure that we do the curriculum. We need to make sure we prep students for state testing. We need to make sure that you're doing your lessons. We're going to be doing your virtual walkthroughs, your virtual observations. So, oh my goodness, all that added stress aside from their family life. And like, for example, like yourself, like, you've got William there. And sometimes, I know that you have to present, and then William might be there. And, he's just being William, like a little kid. And so imagine, and for myself, as seeing teachers, like, they're teaching, they've got to worry about their 25, 26 kids on the other side of the camera. And then aside from that, they are still a mom or dad to the kids that they have at home. I'm just like, oh my goodness, these are conversations that need to be had. And I think that there really isn't enough, at least maybe I haven't seen it, but there really needs to be a lot more and a lot more help. And I think a lot of teachers and a lot of educators really just have to take that into account and just say, hey, this is a safe space. I just need to talk, unwind, because like you said, once they ask, well, why are you feeling that way? That question can be so freeing,
That
and
why
they can take so much off of their chest, like you were sharing.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things. So obviously I did my Innovator in Sweden, and I actually went into Innovator with an idea around accessibility and dyslexia and things like that. And I was working on an extension to improve focus. I had a wonderful friend I met working at PyTop who was helping me, but in his free time, to develop this extension. And I suddenly stopped and I thought, why am I doing this? This isn't where my passion is. I'm doing this mental health staff room, and I'm listening to stories, and I genuinely enjoy hearing them and drawing people out, just like you're doing with the Tech Life podcast and things. Why don't I create a website? Why don't I let people share their stories? Because there's something so powerful about sharing your mental health journey, whether it has a positive ending, which most of them do, or whether it's still an ongoing problem, because people can not only read it and appreciate what other people are going through, but also they can read it and recognize themselves in the story. And I'm so lucky. I put a call out, and I think I got 15 different stories for the website, but I'd still love more. So if anyone else has stories who are watching this, I'm more than happy to have anonymous stories. So there are a few on there that are anonymous. Most of them, people are happy to share their identity, because I think they've reached that point of, I'm happy to share my story, so I'm happy to be me. I even had one teacher who phoned me up and dictated their story, because they said they couldn't they couldn't write it down, and they didn't want me to record it because they wouldn't be as honest. And this teacher poured out their story, and I'm frantically taking notes and turning it into a document, which I then sent and said, is this what you had in mind? And they were able to send back a few corrections based on my understanding and whatever else. And it's one of the most moving stories I've read on there, and it was just dictated to me. And I love that people were willing to share their stories with me. So that was what I ended up turning into my Innovator project, my mental health and education website. Thank you for sharing that. And honestly, I like giving people that voice, the opportunity to talk about what's happened and where they want to go from here. And one of the things I found interesting is I've had two sides of the story. So obviously in my case, I went into education with mental health problems, and in some ways that helped me step aside. And then there are a good couple of stories, at least, where they've said their mental health made them finish another job and go into teaching, where their empathy and their nature could be properly appreciated. And that was, I actually didn't expect that, but it was interesting to see that side of things. And I've got, there are stories on there from anxiety and depression are the most common. They seem to be very common among educators. but people with bipolar disorder, eating disorders. One student shared their story anonymously. That was obviously not nice, but good that she was willing to talk about what had gone on. And it's been really good to see other people's perspectives, because I know what it's like for me as someone with anxiety and depression, but I don't know necessarily how those other illnesses work. So I'm just really grateful for the teachers who have been willing to share. So yeah, that was my innovative project that came out of Starframe, really.
And and sometimes, like you said, you just learn how to pivot. So what I'm and this is, you're pivoting to something that is great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, guys, I know I did pop in the link for our audience members right now that are viewing, but you can all, and I did put Kat's Twitter handle also as well, that you can get in contact with them. But I'm going to go ahead and just share here, and this is the website, all right here, so we can go ahead and check this out. So Kat, just go ahead and walk us through here, if somebody wants to contact you, or what can we find here on this website?
So the first thing was, I wanted to make sure that there was a link, because I know that sometimes when people struggle, and I've had this a few times, people have messaged me when they are struggling, and I have to keep saying, I'm not a mental health professional. I can't, I can, listen to your story, but I can't be responsible. So I have got that link for urgent support. And I think if you are genuinely struggling, if you are not coping, you should contact your local area's support, whether that be Mind or your doctor or Samaritans or whatever else. I do need to build on that one, but there are sort of definitely support services in different areas, and I want to make sure that's really clear. And I think I've written it on some of the home pages. Don't expect me to be a mental health professional. That's not who I am. So that was sort of the first thing. And then we've got the stories tab, which is just all of the different stories I've got, and where possible, I've written what the problem is with them. And you can see that some of them have got pictures where people have been willing to share, and some of them don't, because they've been put through anonymously. And I've just been really lucky to have lovely stories shared with me. And then the one that's important, obviously, is share your story. So that's got information. So if you click on the share your story tab, that gives you the form, the link to the form, so you can fill it in and just let me know your story. But I'm also equally happy if you want to just message me directly on Twitter or drop me an email. I have absolutely no problem with getting a message from someone saying, I want to share my story, but I'm not confident enough to talk about it in public. Then that's not a problem. I've had people share me Google Docs and just say, I started writing this. Is this okay? And some of them haven't been published yet because they haven't finished writing. But even I think one of the things that I found really powerful is that, and I've mentioned this before, the catharsis element of it, and just having that opportunity to write it down, whether or not you share it. I think that's really important. So I do sort of say, even if you're not going to send it to me, or even if you don't want me to publish it, it's worth writing things down, because it helps you get your head in order. It helps you figure out what's going on in your life. And then so the only other thing I put on the site was a few school resources. So, for example, I've mentioned another thing. The School Mental Health Award is a really nice project by a UK university, where it's an internationally recognised award that schools can work towards. And I think that's just really useful, because it's all about staff and school resilience, and it's like a proper award. So when I had a meeting with one of the people who helps award it, and it was fascinating, like the amount of work that needs to go in it as a school. You really have to actually care about your staff and students. And so that was really
That's something
nice.
interesting that you said. You actually have to care about your staff and students. I thought that would be just something that's kind of like a given, but
I think
sometimes,
unfortunately there are so many pressures on people who are in senior roles in schools that, depending on how empathetic they are, sometimes that caring for the staff certainly falls off the radar, because you're worried about the scores, the spending, the other things, the behavior.
yeah.
It's often not a priority, and it should be. It should always be a priority, because we get burnout far too frequently. How many teachers have left the profession because they just can't go on anymore?
Yep, I agree with you, and that's you've seen teachers leave, mid-year, or teachers that just decided not to even start the new school year based on the experience that they had a year ago, when all this took place in March. So it was very difficult, to find new teachers that are willing to go out there and just understand what they're going to be really stepping into. But
Yeah.
it's important too that they feel supported, and that's something that's definitely a big need too as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just it makes such a big difference having that opportunity to, or having a senior leadership as school staff that care about one another can make such a huge difference. And I think I mean, if people go away with one thing, it'd be stop the stigma. Talk about it. Don't be afraid to say I'm struggling. Okay, the first person you talk to might not be willing to listen, but there are people who are willing to listen and support. Actually, yeah, going back to one of the stories, that one of the anonymous stories, the teacher said to me, I couldn't, I was too afraid to talk to somebody, and actually it was talking to my co-teacher that made all the difference, that allowed me to feel confident then to talk to the head and move on with my life. And I thought it would hold me back and stop me getting a promotion. Actually, speaking to the head teacher made me get the promotion, because they understood then why my behavior had been strange. And I just think we need to make sure that everybody is more aware. And like you were saying, there are a lot of people who don't struggle with their mental health, and that's great, but you need to understand what it's like for people who do struggle, because it's overwhelming and powerful. And if you don't know what that's like, then of course you're not going to know how to help. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, Kat, thank you so much for being here today on this Saturday, and really just putting yourself out there, sharing your story and what you've been able to do and accomplish, and how this concept of this idea of Staffroom came to fruition thanks to the work and conversations of many other innovators, and you being able to put this out there with your experience that you've had, understanding and creating this space where educators all over the world, anyone is welcome to join in and just partake in the conversations, whether sometimes, like, they are deep conversations, sometimes they're just more superficial, like how's everybody doing, or what new tech tools are out there, or what have you used, and where you can ask. But it's that safe space where we can all just know that we can go to, and somebody either has gone through the experience, or somebody will be there to lift you up. And I think that's one of the best things that I love about Staff Room too as well, is that we have so many people there that are willing to listen and help build you up, build each other up, and just it, I don't know, it's just amazing. So I can't believe it's going to be a year now, and it's so exciting. And so again, Kat, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your passion in being able to uh, remove that stigma of mental health, and giving a space to educators to be able to share their stories, much like with this podcast too. I mean, I never thought that this would be my innovator project, but just to be able to hear the stories of educators that are out there, and important stories that can help others understand whatever it is that we may be talking about. And so thank you so much
Yeah.
for being part of my passion project, and sharing your story.
Thank you for everything you're doing. I love hearing other people's stories, as I've said. And I'll just say one more thing. If you are thinking about joining us for Starframe, please do. We may look like a bunch of close friends, but actually you'll find that someone's only been there once before. We just welcome everybody in. There's a sense of, okay, we don't know you. Hi, say hello if you want to. Otherwise, you can lurk for a bit. And it's just a very friendly place, and an opportunity to let your hair down, relax, and have a giggle. In my case, I have a hot chocolate or something and have a little treat. So please do join us. It's not threatening, it's not intimidating. You might see some people you think are edu famous, but I promise
Yeah.
that they're all just a bunch of loons too.
Yeah, and then I think that's the best part too, that a lot of people will see that you'll be like, "Oh my goodness, this is so and
Yeah.
so that I see all the time and I see them there and they're here." It's like, "Hey, we just love to hang out and hang out with people that understand what we're going through or and help build each other up." So that's amazing. So yeah, definitely join on Sundays. You'll see people sometimes they'll be barbecuing while they're in staff room, which is great. We've got a famous cook too, who our friend Rachel, who joins in, and she's always cooking something up, and we always ask her recipes. And it's fun times with bowls of ice cream, apple crumble, and just casual conversation. And so it's just great. So join us, and hopefully we'll see you there either tomorrow, it's Sunday, or maybe on another following Sunday. But again, don't hesitate to join, listen, learn, and have a space where you can share how you're doing. So again, Kat, thank you so much. I appreciate you and everything that you do. Thank you to all our audience members, those of you that are watching, those of you that are going to be rewatching this. Thank you so much for your support and continually making my EdTech life what it is today. And again, I really appreciate every single one of you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. And we will see you guys next Wednesday. And until next time, stay techy, my friends.